What if everything you've been told about self-discipline is wrong? What if willpower isn't something you lack, but something you've been using incorrectly? What if the struggle, the constant failure, the endless cycle of starting and stopping, what if none of that was your fault? This is the ancient secret of self-discipline. For thousands of years, across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, certain individuals discovered something remarkable, not through modern psychology or neuroscience, but through direct observation of the human condition. They learned how to master themselves, not through punishment or force, but through principles so elegant, so simple, that we've overlooked them in our search for complicated solutions. I'm going to share these secrets with you. 10 principles, each tested across millennia, each proven in the lives of warriors, philosophers, monks, and rulers. These aren't motivational tricks. These aren't productivity hacks. These are fundamental truths about how human beings actually change. Are you ready to discover what the ancients knew? Then let's begin. Chapter 1. The Warrior's Morning. 500 years before the Common Era in Sparta, a young warrior woke before dawn, not because an alarm jolted him awake, not because he felt motivated, but because he had made a decision the night before about who he would be when morning came. This distinction matters more than you realize. The ancient world understood something we've forgotten. Self-discipline doesn't begin when you need to do something difficult. It begins the moment before you need it. Discipline is built in advance, in quiet moments when nothing is at stake. The Spartan warrior prepared himself for battle, not on the battlefield, but in the daily rituals he performed when no enemy was near. Rising early wasn't about productivity. It was about proving to himself, every single day, that he controlled his own body, that when he commanded himself to rise, he would rise. Think about your own morning. You set an alarm, it rings, and in that crucial moment, a battle begins. Your disciplined self fights your comfortable self. Sometimes discipline wins. Often it doesn't. Either way, you've started the day with conflict. The ancient secret is different. Discipline isn't about winning these moment-to-moment battles. It's about eliminating them entirely. How? By understanding that decisions made in advance are exponentially more powerful than decisions made in the moment. The Spartan didn't decide whether to wake early each morning. He had already decided, once, with full commitment. Morning simply executed the decision. Modern neuroscience confirms what the ancients knew intuitively. When you make a decision in advance, you're using your prefrontal cortex, the rational, planning part of your brain. When you try to make the same decision in the moment of temptation or difficulty, you're fighting against the limbic system, the ancient, emotional, immediate gratification-seeking part. It's not a fair fight. The limbic system is older, faster, stronger. Trying to out-discipline it in the moment is like trying to outrun a lion. Sometimes you'll succeed. Mostly you won't. But here's the elegant solution the ancients discovered. You don't fight the lion. You simply never enter the territory where the lion lives. The Spartan decided to wake at dawn once, in a moment of clarity and commitment. Then he created an identity around that decision. He wasn't someone who tried to wake early. He was someone who wakes early. Present tense. Identity, not aspiration. This shifts everything. When the cold morning comes, and your body wants to stay warm in bed, you're not making a decision. You're simply being who you are. The decision was already made. You're just executing it. Think about areas of your life where you already have effortless discipline. Perhaps you brush your teeth daily without internal debate. Perhaps you go to work on scheduled days, without negotiating with yourself. Perhaps you feed your children without needing motivation. Why is discipline effortless in these areas? Because you decided in advance, probably long ago, that these are simply things you do. They're not options. They're not subject to daily renegotiation. They're part of your identity. The ancient secret is to extend this same principle to any area where you want discipline. You don't build discipline through repeated acts of willpower. You build it through one clear decision, made in advance, about who you are. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius kept a journal where he reminded himself of this principle. He wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for?" Notice what he's doing. He's not debating whether to get up. He's reminding himself of a decision already made, an identity already established. He's a human being with work to do. Getting up isn't optional. It's definitional. This is radically different from the modern approach to discipline. We try to motivate ourselves each time. We try to feel like doing the difficult thing. We wait for inspiration or energy, or the right mood. The ancient approach is simpler and far more powerful. Decide once who you are. Then be that person. Eliminate the daily negotiation. Eliminate the battle. Eliminate the possibility of choosing differently. This doesn't mean rigidity. It means clarity. The Spartan warrior had decided he rises at dawn, but he had also decided he rests when injured. He trains when healthy. He adapts tactics when circumstances change. These were all advanced decisions about his identity, not moment-to-moment negotiations. You can do the same. Don't try to discipline yourself to exercise today. Decide, once, that you're someone who exercises. Then simply be that person. The execution becomes almost automatic. Don't try to force yourself to eat healthy at each meal. Decide, once, what kind of person you are regarding food. Then be that person. The individual choices become expressions of identity, not tests of willpower. The warrior's morning teaches us this. Self-discipline isn't about strength of will in difficult moments. It's about clarity of identity in advance of those moments. When you know who you are, discipline isn't a struggle. It's simply being yourself. Chapter 2. The Philosopher's Pause. In ancient Athens, Socrates had a peculiar habit. In the middle of conversations, sometimes at crucial moments, he would simply stop, pause, stand completely still, sometimes for minutes, sometimes longer. His students found it baffling. His critics found it amusing. But Socrates understood something profound about self-discipline. The space between stimulus and response is where freedom lies. You're insulted, and you immediately react. You see dessert, and you immediately reach for it. You feel lazy, and you immediately skip your commitment. The ancient world recognized that this immediacy is the enemy of discipline. The impulse and the action are so close together that choice disappears. Socrates created space, deliberately, physically. He would pause between thought and action, between feeling and response, between impulse and choice. This wasn't hesitation, it was power. Modern psychology has a term for this: response flexibility. It's the ability to choose your response, rather than reacting automatically. Research shows it's one of the strongest predictors of success in life, stronger even than IQ or talent. But the ancients didn't just study it, they practiced it. The Stoic philosophers developed specific techniques for creating this pause. Epictetus taught his students to begin every impulse with the words, "You are just an impression." When you feel anger rising, You say, you are just an impression, and not at all the thing you appear to be. This creates a momentary gap. The anger is still there, but you've created space around it. You've reminded yourself that you're not the anger. You're the one observing the anger, and the observer can choose. In Buddhist tradition, monks practiced similar techniques. When desire arose, they would note it. Desire is arising. Not I want this, but desire is arising. The subtle shift in language creates the crucial pause. You're not identifying with the impulse. You're witnessing it. This might seem like a small distinction. It's not. It's the difference between being swept away by every passing impulse and maintaining sovereignty over your own actions. Think about your last failure of discipline. Probably there was a moment, brief, barely noticeable, between the impulse and the action. You felt like eating the thing you'd committed to avoiding. Then, almost instantly, you were eating it. The gap between impulse and action was so small you didn't even notice it existed. The ancient secret is to make that gap visible, to expand it, to live in it. How? First, by simply naming what's happening. When you feel the impulse to quit your workout early, pause and name it. I'm feeling the desire to stop. Not I should stop, or I'm going to stop, but I'm feeling the desire to stop. This simple act of naming creates distance. You've transformed from someone experiencing an overwhelming compulsion into someone observing an interesting phenomenon. The desire is still there, but you're no longer merged with it. Second, by physically pausing. Socrates literally stopped moving. You can do the same. When you feel the impulse to react, to indulge, to quit, pause. Take 3 breaths, count to 10, walk around the block. The specific technique matters less than the act of creating space. The ancient Chinese had a practice called waiting for the mud to settle. When water is stirred up, mud clouds it. But if you simply wait, don't act, the mud settles and the water becomes clear. They applied this to decisions and impulses. Don't act while the mud is stirred. Wait. Let clarity return. This requires trust. Trust that if you pause, you won't miss some crucial opportunity. Trust that the space between impulse and action won't be unbearable. Trust that you can observe desire without immediately satisfying it. The ancients cultivated this trust through practice. They started with small pauses, a few seconds before speaking in conversation, a moment before eating, a breath before reacting to criticism. These small pauses trained the capacity for larger ones. Over time, something remarkable happens. The pause becomes natural. You stop having to force it. Your nervous system learns that there's always space between feeling and action, between stimulus and response. This space becomes your home, the place where your discipline lives. Notice that this isn't suppression. The Stoics weren't trying to eliminate emotions or desires. They were creating the freedom to choose which ones to act on. You can feel anger and choose not to speak. You can feel desire and choose not to indulge. You can feel resistance and choose to work anyway. The feeling doesn't have to change. Only the automatic response to the feeling has to change. This is radically different from most modern approaches to discipline, which focus on changing feelings, trying to make yourself feel motivated, trying to eliminate desire, trying to suppress difficult emotions. All of that is exhausting and largely ineffective. The philosopher's pause teaches something simpler. You don't need to change how you feel. You need to change how you respond to how you feel. And you do that by creating space, by pausing, by remembering that you are not your impulses. You are the one who chooses which impulses to follow. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The pause is how you claim that power. In the space between what happens and what you do about it, freedom exists. Discipline exists. Choice exists. Practice the pause today, just once. When you feel a strong impulse to eat, to quit, to react, to indulge, pause. Name what's happening. Take 3 breaths, then choose. You might choose to follow the impulse. You might choose differently. Either way, you've claimed your power. You've lived in the space where discipline is born. Chapter 3. The Monk's Repetition. In a Tibetan monastery, a young monk performs the same prostration for the 10,000th time. His body moves through the familiar pattern. Hands to forehead, to throat, to heart. Then down to the ground, then rising again. Over and over for hours, for days, for years. To the modern mind, this seems like madness. Surely there's a more efficient way to achieve whatever this is meant to achieve. Surely after the first 100 times, the point has been made. But the monk knows something we've forgotten. Discipline isn't built through variety. It's built through repetition so complete that it rewrites your nervous system. The ancient world understood that human beings are habitual creatures. We don't do what we decide to do once. We do what we've trained ourselves to do through repetition. The conscious decision is almost irrelevant. What matters is the pattern carved into your nervous system through repeated action. Modern neuroscience has discovered the mechanism behind this ancient wisdom. Every time you repeat an action, particularly when you're paying attention, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with that action. Myelin, a fatty substance, wraps around the neural pathway, making signals travel faster and more efficiently. This is why practiced actions become automatic, why the musician's fingers find the right notes without conscious thought, why the athlete's body executes complex movements while the mind strategizes, why the monk's prostration happens almost without him, freeing his consciousness for contemplation. The implication for discipline is profound. You don't build discipline by deciding to be disciplined. You build it by repeating disciplined actions until they become automatic, until your nervous system is trained, until doing the disciplined thing is actually easier than not doing it. Consider a Zen monastery. Every morning, the same routine. Wake at the same time. Meditation. Work. Meals. Study more meditation. Sleep. The schedule doesn't vary. For months. For years. For a lifetime. This isn't imprisonment. It's liberation. The monk doesn't waste any energy deciding what to do next. The pattern is so deeply ingrained that it simply unfolds. Energy that would be spent on decisions is freed for deeper practice. The ancient Greeks called this hexis, a state of being that comes from repeated practice. Aristotle argued that we become virtuous not by thinking about virtue, but by repeatedly performing virtuous actions, until virtuous behavior becomes our natural state. You become disciplined, not by deciding to be disciplined, but by repeatedly doing disciplined things. The repetition itself transforms you. But here's the subtle part that most people miss. Not all repetition builds discipline. Mindless repetition builds nothing. The ancient secret is repetition with awareness. The monk isn't just mechanically moving through prostrations. He's present for each one. He's paying attention. He's using the repetition to deepen awareness, not escape it. This distinction matters enormously. You could go to the gym every day for a year and build no real discipline. If you're just going through the motions, distracted, waiting for it to be over, or you could go for a month with full presence, attending to each movement. each sensation, each choice, and build deep discipline. The quality of attention during repetition determines what gets encoded in your nervous system. Distracted repetition encodes distraction. Present repetition encodes presence and control. The Shaolin monks exemplify this principle. They practice the same movements thousands of times. But they're not just building muscle memory. They're building what they call yi, focused intention. Each repetition is performed with complete attention, as if it's the first time and the last time simultaneously. This transforms repetition from boring routine into powerful practice. The 10,000th prostration isn't less meaningful than the first. It's more meaningful because it carries the awareness of all 9,999 previous repetitions. You can apply this ancient principle to modern discipline challenges. Want to build the discipline to exercise? Don't focus on variety and excitement. Choose simple movements. Repeat them. Attend to them. Be present for the repetition. Let the repetition carve new patterns into your nervous system. Want to build the discipline to eat well? Don't constantly experiment with new diets. Choose simple, healthy meals. Eat them repeatedly. Be present while eating. Let the repetition train your taste buds, your digestion, your relationship with food. Want to build the discipline to focus? Don't look for new productivity systems every week. Choose simple focus practices. Repeat them daily. Be present during practice. Let the repetition train your attention. The ancient approach values depth over variety. The modern world constantly seeks novelty, believing variety prevents boredom. But the ancients understood that true depth, true transformation, comes through repetition so complete that it transcends boredom and becomes meditation. The monk performing his 10,000th prostration isn't bored. He's found something in repetition that variety can never provide, the opportunity to go deeper than surface experience, to find new dimensions in familiar actions, to train the nervous system so thoroughly that discipline becomes effortless. There's a story about a martial arts master who spent 3 years practicing a single punch. Students asked why. He explained, "After 3,000 repetitions, I understood the punch intellectually. After 30,000, my body understood it. After 300,000, the punch and I became one. Now I don't punch. The universe punches through me." This is the endpoint of repetition with awareness. The action becomes so deeply ingrained that it's no longer something you do. It's something you are. This is discipline at its highest level. Not forcing yourself to act against your nature, but transforming your nature through repetition until disciplined action is natural. Begin with one practice, something simple, not a complex routine that requires constant decision-making. One practice. Repeat it daily. Be present during the repetition. Don't seek variety, seek depth. Let the repetition do its ancient work of rewiring your nervous system. Trust that the 10,000th time will reveal what the 10th time cannot. Chapter 4. The General's Strategy. Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War more than 2,000 years ago. One principle stands above all others in his military philosophy. Every battle is won before it is fought. The general who wins has already won, through superior preparation and positioning. The actual battle is merely confirmation. This same principle governs self-discipline. Every moment of discipline, or lack of discipline, is determined long before the moment arrives. If you're fighting in the moment, you've already lost. The ancient strategists understood something most modern people miss. Willpower is a terrible strategy. If you're relying on strength of will to overcome temptation or difficulty in the moment, You're fighting the hardest battle in the worst possible circumstance. Sun Tzu would never advise this. He would say, arrange the battlefield so victory is inevitable before engagement begins. Position yourself so the enemy, your impulses, your weaknesses, your temptations cannot reach you. In ancient Rome, Cato the Younger was famous for his incorruptible character. People marveled at his self-discipline, his ability to resist temptations that destroyed other men. But Cato's secret wasn't superior willpower. It was superior strategy. He never put himself in situations where his discipline would be tested unnecessarily. He avoided places where corruption was easy. He chose friends who reinforced, rather than challenged his principles. He structured his environment so that doing the right thing was the path of least resistance. This is the general's approach to discipline. You don't build strength to fight harder battles. You position yourself so battles become unnecessary. Modern psychology calls this choice architecture. Research shows that people's decisions are massively influenced by environmental design. If healthy food is visible and convenient, while junk food requires effort to access, people eat healthier without any increase in willpower. But the ancients understood this principle thousands of years before the research. They knew that human nature is constant, but circumstances are variable. Change the circumstances, and you change the outcome without changing the person. Think about this practically. You want to build the discipline to eat less sugar. The modern approach is to rely on willpower. Keep sugar in the house, but resist eating it. This is fighting the battle in the worst possible circumstance. The ancient approach is strategic. Don't buy the sugar. Remove it from your environment. Now, discipline doesn't require any effort. You can't eat what isn't there. You've won the battle before it began. You want to build the discipline to exercise early in the morning. The modern approach is to fight your tired body every morning, using willpower to get yourself to the gym. This is exhausting and frequently fails. The ancient approach is strategic. Prepare everything the night before. Gym clothes laid out, bag packed, water bottle filled. Nothing to decide, nothing to overcome. Just execute the predetermined plan. You've removed the friction points where discipline typically fails. Alexander the Great studied strategy under Aristotle. When he led his armies, he thought like a general, not like a warrior. The warrior fights bravely in the moment. The general wins by positioning before the moment arrives. One of Alexander's famous tactics was burning his ships after landing on enemy shores. His soldiers couldn't retreat because retreat was impossible. He'd arranged the battlefield so that only forward movement was available. Discipline became irrelevant. There was only one option. You can apply this same principle. Want to build the discipline to write every day? Burn your ships. Tell people publicly you're writing a book. Now, not writing has social consequences. You've made the undisciplined choice harder than the disciplined one. Want to build the discipline to save money? Burn your ships. Set up automatic transfers to savings the day your paycheck arrives. You never see the money. Saving requires no discipline because it happens automatically. The key insight is this: your future self will face temptation with limited willpower. Your current self, in a moment of clarity and commitment, can make decisions and create structures that protect your future self from having to fight. Sun Tzu wrote, "The victorious army first wins and then seeks battle. The defeated army first battles and then seeks victory." This applies perfectly to discipline. The disciplined person first creates victory through structure and strategy, then simply executes. The undisciplined person battles moment by moment, trying to achieve victory through force. Ancient strategists also understood the importance of small victories. They didn't engage in massive battles where defeat was possible. They maneuvered until they could win small, certain victories. Then they built on those victories. Apply this to discipline. Don't try to transform your entire life overnight. That's seeking a massive, uncertain battle. Instead, find one small area where you can engineer certain victory. Build the structure. Remove the obstacles. Make success inevitable. Win that small battle, then expand. The Roman general Fabius fought Hannibal by refusing to engage in direct battle. He harassed the edges. He controlled the terrain. He waited until circumstances favored him. His troops called him the delayer. Historians call him the strategist who saved Rome. Sometimes discipline means strategic delay, not fighting the battle in this moment, because circumstances don't favor success. If you're exhausted and stressed, don't try to start a new discipline practice. Wait. Arrange better circumstances. Then begin from a position of strength. The general secret to discipline is simple, but profound. Spend 90% of your effort on strategy and positioning, 10% on execution. Most people do the opposite. They spend 90% fighting moment-to-moment battles, 10% on planning. Then they wonder why discipline feels so hard. Change the ratio. Think like a general. Study your patterns. Identify your weak points. Restructure your environment. Eliminate temptation before it arrives. Create systems that make discipline automatic. Position yourself for inevitable victory. Then, when the moment comes, execution is simple. You're not fighting. You're just following the strategy you developed when your mind was clear and your will was strong. Chapter 5. The Ascetic's Freedom. In the deserts of Egypt, early Christian ascetics lived in caves and ruins. They owned nothing beyond a robe and a bowl. They ate the minimum to survive. They slept on bare ground. To the comfortable world, they appeared imprisoned by harsh discipline. But these ascetics described their life as freedom. Perfect, total freedom. They had discovered an ancient secret. Discipline over small things creates freedom in large things. The modern mind struggles with this paradox. We think freedom means having more options, more choices, more possibilities. The ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. Discipline feels like the opposite of freedom, like restriction, limitation, imprisonment. The ancient ascetics understood something we've lost. Every undisciplined part of your life controls you. Every desire you can't resist is a chain. Every impulse you must follow is a master you serve. What looks like freedom is actually slavery to passing wants. The desert father Anthony left his comfortable life in Alexandria for harsh solitude. People asked why. He explained, "In the city, I was servant to 100 masters. My possessions demanded maintenance. My social obligations demanded time. My appetites demanded satisfaction. My reputation demanded protection. Here, I serve no master but truth." This is the ascetic's insight. What you own owns you. What you desire controls you. What you can't resist directs your life. Discipline, the ability to say no, to live simply, to resist unnecessary wants. This is what creates actual freedom. Modern consumer culture inverts this wisdom completely. It promises that having more will make you free. Buy this and you'll be happy. Acquire that and you'll be satisfied. Pursue every desire and you'll be fulfilled. But notice what actually happens. Each new possession requires maintenance. Creates obligation, demands attention. Each satisfied desire creates new desires. Each indulgence makes future resistance harder. You think you're gaining freedom, but you're actually accumulating chains. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the ancient world. He could have had anything, but he practiced voluntary discomfort. He slept on hard beds when soft ones were available. He ate simple food when feasts surrounded him. He wore plain clothes when imperial finery was expected. Why? Because he understood that comfort makes you weak. Luxury makes you dependent. Having everything you want makes you slave to wanting. His discipline in small physical things preserved his freedom in large mental and spiritual things. His famous meditation reads, "Pass through this brief patch of time in harmony with nature, and come to your final resting place gracefully, just as a ripened olive might drop, praising the earth that nurtured it, and grateful to the tree that gave it growth." Notice the image. The olive doesn't cling to the tree. It doesn't demand to stay longer. It accepts its nature and its time. This acceptance, this discipline of wanting only what is appropriate, is perfect freedom. The Buddhist monks take vows of simplicity, minimal possessions, plain food, modest shelter. But when you talk to them about their practice, they speak of liberation. The vows aren't restrictions. They're freedoms. Freedom from endless wanting. Freedom from constant maintenance of possessions. Freedom from slavery to comfort. Here's how this applies to modern discipline. Every area where you lack discipline is an area where you're not free. If you can't resist checking your phone, the phone controls you. If you can't say no to dessert, your appetite controls you. If you can't skip a day of entertainment, your need for distraction controls you. Discipline is how you reclaim that freedom. Not by forcing yourself to suffer, but by liberating yourself from compulsion. The disciplined person doesn't tragically resist dessert. They simply don't need dessert. They've freed themselves from sugar's control. The ascetic tradition teaches a practice called voluntary discomfort. Regularly choose difficulty when ease is available. Walk when you could drive. Fast when you could eat. Sleep on the floor when you have a bed. Cold shower when hot water is available. This isn't punishment. It's training. You're training yourself that you don't need comfort, that you can be fine, even happy, in discomfort. This training creates extraordinary freedom, because suddenly most of what seemed necessary becomes optional. When you need nothing beyond the basics, very little can control you. When you're comfortable being uncomfortable, difficulty loses its power to stop you. When you can delay gratification indefinitely, impulses can't derail your plans. The ancient cynics took this to extremes. Diogenes lived in a barrel, owned a single cloak, ate whatever he could find. He mocked Alexander the Great for being slave to his empire, while Diogenes was free. And there was truth in his mockery. Alexander was bound by obligation to manage his conquests. Diogenes was bound by nothing. You don't need to live in a barrel, but you can practice the principle. Regularly give up something you think you need. Not forever necessarily, but long enough to prove to yourself you don't need it. This practice breaks the power it held over you. Try a day without your phone, without coffee, without comfort food, without entertainment, without whatever you reach for when stressed or bored or tired. Just one day. You'll discover you survive fine, maybe better than fine. That discovery is freedom. You thought you needed that thing. It turns out you don't. It no longer controls you. You've disciplined yourself free from its grip. The ascetic secret is that freedom and discipline aren't opposites. Discipline creates freedom. Every small thing you can say, No to is one less master in your life. Every comfort you can decline is one less dependency. Every impulse you can resist is one less chain binding you. The undisciplined person thinks they're free because they do whatever they want. But watch their life closely. They can't wake up early because sleep is their master. They can't eat healthy because appetite is their master. They can't focus because distraction is their master. They can't save money because impulse is their master. They serve 100 petty tyrants and call it freedom. The disciplined person serves almost nothing. They decide what matters, pursue that with full commitment, and remain free from the 1,000 small wants that enslave everyone else. This is the ascetic's paradox. Through discipline over small things, you gain freedom in everything. Chapter 6. The Craftsman's Patience. In ancient Japan, a master sword maker spent 3 months folding a single blade, heating and hammering, folding the steel back on itself, creating thousands of layers. 3 months on one sword. In our world of instant results, this seems absurd. But the blade that emerged from those 3 months was nearly perfect, unbreakable, holding an edge for decades, worth more than a year's wages. The craftsman's patience created something that urgency never could. This is the ancient secret of patience. Real discipline isn't about intensity. It's about duration. It's not about how hard you work for a week. It's about how consistently you work for years. The modern world has conditioned us to expect fast results. We want transformation now. We want skills immediately. We want success quickly. So we bring intense effort for short periods. We burn bright and burn out. Then we wonder why we have nothing lasting to show for our efforts. The ancient craftsman understood something different. Mastery takes time. Excellence takes time. Anything worth creating takes time. Rushing doesn't speed the process. It ruins it. Consider the medieval cathedral builders. Some cathedrals took 200 years to complete. Generations of craftsmen worked on the same building. Each stone mason knew he would never see the finished structure. Yet each stone was placed with perfect patience, perfect care. Why? Because the work itself demanded it. Stone doesn't hurry. Mortar needs time to cure. Foundations must settle. Rushing these processes doesn't save time. It causes collapse. Your growth is the same. Character doesn't develop quickly. Skill doesn't develop quickly. Wisdom doesn't develop quickly. Trying to force rapid development doesn't accelerate the process. It short-circuits it. The ancient Greeks had a concept called chronos and another called kairos. Chronos is clock time. Measurable, linear, quantitative. Kairos is the right time. Qualitative, appropriate, opportune. Modern culture knows only chronos. Everything measured in hours, days, efficiency. The ancients valued kairos, doing things when they're ready, not when the schedule demands. A tree grows at its own pace. You can't force it. A child develops at their own pace. You can't rush it. Your discipline and character are the same. They develop according to their own timeline, not your impatient demands. The ancient craftsman worked with natural rhythms. A potter had to wait for clay to reach the right consistency. A brewer had to wait for fermentation. A tanner had to wait for leather to cure. Fighting these timelines produced inferior work. Accepting them produced excellence. Modern discipline advice often emphasizes intensity. Work harder. Push more. Maximum effort. This produces quick results followed by burnout and regression. You sprint for a while, then collapse. The net progress over years is minimal. The ancient approach emphasizes consistency over intensity. Show up every day, do the work. Don't demand immediate results. Trust the process. This produces slow results followed by compounding growth that continues for decades. The bamboo tree spends 5 years developing roots before any visible growth appears above ground. Then, in 6 weeks, it grows 90 feet. Imagine a modern gardener planting bamboo, seeing nothing for 5 years, and deciding it's not working. They'd quit just before the explosive growth. Your discipline practices work the same way. You might practice meditation for months, with no apparent benefit. You might exercise for a year with modest visible changes. You might study daily with slow comprehension. Then suddenly, everything integrates. You break through. Growth accelerates. But only if you had the patience to continue through the invisible growth period. The ancient master musician spent 10 years learning scales. Boring, repetitive, seemingly pointless. But those 10 years created a foundation that allowed 40 years of creative expression. The modern student wants to skip the scales and start creating immediately. They never develop the foundation, so their ceiling stays low. Patience isn't passive. It's active commitment to process over time. The sword maker didn't just wait 3 months. He worked every day, heating and folding, attending to each moment while trusting the long timeline. You can practice this. Choose one disciplined practice. Commit to it for longer than feels reasonable, not 3 weeks, not 3 months, 3 years. Decide at the beginning that you won't evaluate results until the timeline completes. Just do the practice. This is radically different from modern advice about testing and iterating and pivoting quickly. There's a place for that approach. But there's also a place for deep commitment to process regardless of immediate results. The ancient potters in China spent their entire lives perfecting one type of glaze. One glaze, for 50 years. Not because they were slow learners, because mastery at that level requires decades. They didn't chase trends or try new techniques every season. They went deep into one thing. In your life, what deserves that level of commitment? What practice, what skill, what discipline is worth pursuing for decades? Identify it. Then begin the patient work of mastery. Here's what patience teaches that intensity never can. Intensity proves you can work hard for a short time. Patience proves you can work consistently forever. Intensity impresses others briefly. Patience transforms you permanently. Intensity is about the work. Patience is about who you become through the work. The ancient Stoics practiced what they called the long view. Every frustration, every impatience, every demand for quick results was met with the same question. Will this matter in 5 years? In 10? Most things won't. So why let them disturb your peace or rush your process? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, look back over the past, with its changing empires that rose and fell, and you can foresee the future too. Its pattern will be the same, down to the last detail, for it cannot break step with the steady march of events. Studying the lives of men for 40 years, or 10,000 is therefore the same. What more could you see? This is the patience that comes from understanding deep time. Your urgent crisis today will be forgotten next year. Your rushed project will be obsolete in a decade. But the character you build through patient practice will remain. The skills you develop through years of work will serve you for a lifetime. Slow down. Trust the process. Do the work. Be patient with yourself, with the timeline, with the invisible growth happening beneath the surface. You're not building a sprint. You're building a cathedral. And cathedrals take time. Chapter 7. The ruler's restraint. The Roman Emperor Augustus had absolute power. He could execute anyone, seize any property, declare any law. Yet he practiced remarkable restraint. He limited his own power voluntarily. He created systems that would outlast him. He understood that discipline at the top creates order throughout. This is the ancient secret of leadership discipline. The person with the most power must exercise the most restraint, because undisciplined power corrupts everything it touches. But this principle applies beyond political leadership. In your own life, you are the ruler. You have power over your decisions, your time, your attention, your resources. How you exercise that power determines everything. The undisciplined ruler uses power impulsively. Wants something, feels angry, lashes out, sees opportunity, grabs it without thought. This creates chaos. The kingdom, your life, becomes disordered, unstable, eventually collapses. The disciplined ruler uses power strategically. Every exercise of power serves larger purposes. Short-term wants are sacrificed for long-term good. Impulses are examined before action. The kingdom thrives. Ancient Chinese philosophy developed this into a complete system. The emperor, who could govern himself, could govern the empire. The emperor who couldn't govern himself couldn't govern anything. Self-discipline and political success were inseparable. Confucius taught, to put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. To cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts right. Notice the direction. It starts with self. It starts with discipline over your own heart, your own life. Only then can you create order in larger domains. You might think you're not a ruler, so this doesn't apply. But you rule the kingdom of your life. You make decisions about time, money, relationships, health, career. You have subjects, your future self, your dependents, your responsibilities. How well you govern this kingdom determines everything. The disciplined ruler thinks in terms of systems, not impulses. Augustus didn't make decisions based on what he wanted in the moment. He asked, what system, what law, what structure will create the outcome I want even when I'm not personally managing it? You can apply this principle. Instead of disciplining yourself moment by moment, create systems that govern your behavior. Instead of deciding each morning whether to exercise, create a system that makes exercise automatic. Instead of deciding each purchase individually, create a budget system that governs spending. The ruler's discipline is about building structures, not fighting battles. The undisciplined person fights every temptation as it arises. The disciplined ruler has created systems where most temptations never arise or are automatically handled. Ancient rulers also understood the power of restraint in communication. The wise king spoke rarely but powerfully. When he spoke, people listened because his words were measured, considered, backed by restraint. The fool king spoke constantly, sharing every thought and feeling. His words lost power through volume. People stopped listening. In your life, practice the ruler's restraint in speech. Don't share every opinion. Don't react to every provocation. Don't explain yourself constantly. Speak less, but make your words count. This builds authority, in others' eyes and in your own. The Emperor Hadrian traveled his empire on foot, living simply despite having unlimited resources. He could have moved in luxury everywhere, but he understood that restraint in privilege builds respect and self-discipline. The ruler who indulges every desire becomes weak, loses connection with subjects, eventually loses the kingdom. You are that ruler. Every time you could indulge, but choose restraint instead, you build strength. Every time you could take the easy path, but choose challenge, you develop character. The restraint itself is the discipline that makes you fit to rule your own life. Ancient Persian kings practiced a discipline called the royal no. For every 10 requests, they would deny 9, even reasonable ones. This wasn't cruelty, it was training. Training themselves to say no. Training their court that requests weren't automatically granted. Creating a culture of restraint. You can practice the royal no. When someone asks for your time, your money, your energy, practice saying no. Not to everything, but to most things. This protects your resources for what truly matters. This trains others that your yes actually means something, because your no is real. The disciplined ruler also understood succession. Augustus spent decades preparing his succession. He knew his empire needed to outlast him. So he built institutions, trained leaders, created systems that would continue. Your life needs this same thinking. You're not building something just for today or just for yourself. You're building something that will outlast you, affect others, create legacy. This long view changes how you exercise discipline. You're not just controlling impulses. You're building something permanent. The ancient concept of the philosopher king, the ruler who combined power with wisdom, represents ideal leadership discipline. Plato argued that until philosophers become kings or kings become philosophers, cities would have no rest from their troubles. You must become the philosopher king of your own life. Combine the power you have with the wisdom to use it well. Study yourself. Understand your weaknesses. Acknowledge your biases. Then create systems and practices that govern you wisely even when your impulses would govern you foolishly. The ruler's greatest discipline is this: accepting that you are fallible, that you will make mistakes, that you cannot trust your in-the-moment judgment completely. Therefore you create structures. You establish laws for yourself. You build systems that protect you from your own worst impulses. This is humility combined with authority. You're humble enough to admit you need guardrails. You're authoritative enough to actually build them and enforce them. This combination creates sustainable self-governance. Rule yourself well. Exercise restraint. Build systems. Practice the royal no. Speak with measured authority. Think in terms of legacy. You are the emperor of your life. Discipline yourself like empire depends on it. Because it does. Chapter 8. The Merchant's Ledger. In ancient Babylon, the most successful merchants kept detailed ledgers. Every transaction recorded. Every gain and loss noted. Every pattern analyzed. They didn't trust memory or feeling. They trusted numbers. This is the ancient secret of measurement. What gets measured gets managed. What gets recorded gets real. Discipline without measurement is just intention. Discipline with measurement becomes transformation. The Babylonian merchant understood that self-deception is easy. You can believe you're doing well when you're failing. You can believe you're failing when you're succeeding. Feelings lie. Memory distorts. Only objective measurement tells truth. Modern life gives us more measurement tools than any ancient civilization. Yet we often measure nothing about our discipline. We rely on feelings. I think I'm doing better. I feel like I'm exercising more. It seems like I'm wasting less time. These are not measurements. These are wishes pretending to be facts. The ancient merchant would never run a business this way. Imagine telling investors, I feel like we're profitable. It seems like sales are up. They'd demand numbers, actual data. Yet we run our lives, which matter more than any business, on feelings and vague impressions. The Stoics practiced daily review. Every evening, They would mentally review the day. Where did they act according to their principles? Where did they fail? What would they do differently? This was measurement. Honest accounting of actual behavior versus intended behavior. Marcus Aurelius kept journals of this daily accounting. He didn't write to publish or impress. He wrote to track his own discipline honestly. The journals that survive show him wrestling with the same struggles repeatedly, noting patterns, identifying weaknesses, measuring growth. This practice transformed abstract intentions into concrete data. Instead of "I want to be patient," he could write, "I was impatient 3 times today. Once with my secretary, once in the Senate, once reading letters. Tomorrow I will pause before responding to irritation." Concrete, measurable, actionable. Benjamin Franklin, though not ancient, studied ancient wisdom extensively. He created a system he called his moral ledger. He identified 13 virtues he wanted to embody. Each day, he tracked whether he had violated each virtue. A simple mark for each violation. Over weeks and months, patterns emerged. He discovered that working on all 13 simultaneously produced no progress. So he focused on one virtue for a full week, measuring only that. Progress accelerated. The measurement showed him what intention never could. That focused attention works better than divided attention. You can apply this principle immediately. Choose one discipline practice you want to build. Create a simple measurement system. If it's exercise, track how many days you actually exercise. If it's meditation, track minutes completed. If it's eating discipline, track meals that met your standard. Don't rely on memory or feelings. Actual data, written down, reviewed regularly. The ancient merchants reviewed their ledgers weekly. They looked for patterns. Which investments paid off? Which customers were reliable? Which expenses were wasteful? The ledger revealed truth that daily activity obscured. Your discipline ledger does the same. You might believe you're doing well, then review your weekly tracking and discover you only succeeded 3 days out of 7. That's not failure. That's information. Information you can use. Or you might believe you're failing. Then review the data and discover you're succeeding more than you thought. This builds confidence and momentum. Either way, measurement reveals reality. There's a principle in business. You can't improve what you don't measure. This is ancient wisdom in modern language. The Babylonian merchants knew it. The Stoic philosophers practiced it. Now neuroscience confirms it. When you track behavior, several powerful things happen. First, the act of tracking increases awareness. You can't sleepwalk through tracked behavior. You have to notice it to record it. Second, tracking creates accountability. The empty space on your tracking sheet, where you should have marked success, creates psychological pressure. Not external pressure, internal pressure. You're accountable to your own measurement system. Third, tracking reveals patterns you'd never notice otherwise. You might discover you fail at discipline more on Thursdays. Why? Because you're tired from accumulated week stress. Now you know to protect Thursday differently. Without tracking, you'd never notice the pattern. Fourth, tracking builds evidence. When you doubt whether you're making progress, the ledger shows you. 30 days ago you exercised once a week. Now you exercise 4 times a week. That's not feeling. That's fact. The ancient Chinese merchants used abacuses to track transactions. The physical act of moving beads made numbers tangible. You can use physical tracking too. A jar of marbles. Moving 1 marble each day, you maintain discipline. A calendar with X marks for success days. Something visible, tangible. Don't make your measurement system complicated. The Babylonian ledgers were simple. 2 columns, income and expense. Clear categories. Basic arithmetic. The simplicity made consistent tracking possible. If your tracking system requires 10 minutes and complex calculations, you won't maintain it. If it requires 10 seconds and a simple mark, you will. The ancient merchants succeeded through sustainable systems, not heroic efforts. One more principle from ancient accounting: regular review cycles. The merchants didn't just record transactions. They reviewed them weekly, monthly, yearly. They looked at larger patterns. Trends, seasonal variations. You need the same. Daily tracking is essential. Weekly review reveals patterns. Monthly review shows trends. Yearly review demonstrates transformation. In your weekly review, ask, where did I succeed this week? Where did I struggle? What patterns emerge? What needs adjustment? This honest accounting keeps you connected to reality, rather than living in hopeful delusions. The merchant's ledger teaches that discipline is measurable. If you can't measure your discipline practice, you probably can't improve it. Vague intentions produce vague results. Specific measurements produce specific improvements. Begin today. Choose one discipline practice. Create a simple measurement system. Track it daily. Review it weekly. Let the numbers tell you the truth that feelings obscure. You'll discover what the ancient merchants knew. Honest accounting is the foundation of sustainable success. Chapter 9. The Hermit's Silence. In the Egyptian desert, early hermits lived in absolute silence. Sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, not because they couldn't speak, because they understood something profound about discipline and noise. The constant chatter, external and internal, is the enemy of self-discipline. In noise, you can't hear yourself think. You can't notice your impulses before they become actions. You can't distinguish between what you truly want and what the noise tells you to want. The ancient hermits understood that most of what we call thinking is actually noise. Recycled thoughts, borrowed opinions, reactions to external stimuli. Beneath that noise lies something else, something quieter. Your actual self, your true will, your deepest wisdom. But you can't access it through more noise. You access it through silence. Modern life has eliminated almost all silence. Music plays everywhere. Podcasts fill every commute. Television runs in the background. Notifications interrupt constantly. Even our thoughts are noisy, jumping from worry to planning to remembering to imagining, never settling. This isn't accidental. Noise is profitable. Silence is not. The modern economy depends on keeping you distracted, reactive, consuming. Silence lets you notice what you actually need, versus what you're told to want. That's dangerous to consumer culture. The ancient hermits weren't escaping the world. They were finding themselves. And they discovered that finding yourself requires radical silence. Not just quiet external environment. Quiet internal environment. The Desert Fathers taught a practice called hesychasm. It means quietness, stillness, silence. The practice involved sitting in silence, breathing rhythmically, repeating a simple prayer until the noise of thought settled and something deeper emerged. Buddhist monks practice similar techniques. Sitting meditation where you watch thoughts arise and fall without engaging them. Over time, the mental noise lessens. Gaps appear between thoughts. In those gaps, clarity lives. This has everything to do with discipline. Most discipline failures happen because you act on noise. The urge to quit your workout is noise. The desire to eat junk food is noise. The impulse to check your phone is noise. These aren't your deepest wisdom speaking. They're surface chatter. When you practice silence, You learn to distinguish between noise and signal, between passing impulse and true intention, between what's shouting loudly and what's speaking quietly, but matters more. The hermit Anthony described his experience. In the beginning, my mind was like a wild horse, running everywhere, impossible to control. But through silence and stillness, gradually the horse learned to stand still. Now I can direct it where I choose. This is what silence does. It settles the wild mind. It creates space between stimulus and response. It lets you choose rather than just react. You don't need to become a desert hermit, but you need some silence. Regular periods where external input stops and internal observation begins. Where you're not consuming content, not being entertained, not distracting yourself. Just present with your own thoughts and sensations. Start small. 5 minutes daily of complete silence. No music, no media, no talking. Just sitting with yourself. Notice what arises. Urges, worries, plans, memories. Notice them without acting on them. Watch them like clouds passing. This practice builds the awareness that discipline requires. You start noticing impulses before they become actions. You start seeing patterns in your mental noise. You start distinguishing between the voice that serves your goals and the voices that undermine them. The ancient practice of fasting served a similar purpose. Not just controlling appetite, but creating silence in the body. When you're not constantly eating, your body quiets down. You notice sensations you usually cover with food. You distinguish between actual hunger and habitual eating. You develop awareness that makes discipline possible. The same principle applies to media fasting. Take a day with no screens. No phone, no computer, no television. Notice what happens. You'll probably feel uncomfortable, maybe anxious. That's withdrawal from constant stimulation. But beneath the discomfort, something else emerges. Presence, awareness, yourself. The Quaker tradition practices what they call listening in silence. The community sits together without speaking, waiting for divine guidance to emerge from the quiet. Whether or not you believe in divine guidance, the practice teaches something valuable. Wisdom emerges from silence, not from more noise. Think about decisions you've made impulsively that you later regretted. Probably they happened in noise. You were agitated, distracted, not centered in yourself. So you acted on whatever impulse was loudest. Now think about good decisions. Probably they emerged from quiet reflection, from stepping back, getting silent, letting clarity emerge from beneath the noise. This is why the ancient hermits practiced silence. Not to escape life, but to make better decisions about life. To act from wisdom rather than impulse. To choose rather than react. Here's a practical application. Before making any significant decision about purchases, relationships, commitments, changes, require yourself to sit in silence for at least 10 minutes. No researching, no discussing, no thinking it through. Just sitting quietly with the question. You'll notice that in silence, different information emerges. In noise, you're influenced by advertising, social pressure, fear of missing out, comparison with others. In silence, you hear what you actually want, what actually matters to you, what aligns with your real values. The hermit's secret is this: discipline becomes easy when you can hear yourself clearly. When you know what you truly want versus what noise tells you to want. When you can distinguish between your deepest intentions and passing impulses. Silence creates that clarity. Noise destroys it. Begin your practice of silence today, even 5 minutes. Sit, breathe, notice. Don't try to control thoughts. Just observe them quietly. Let the mental noise begin to settle. Beneath it, your real self is waiting. The self that knows what you actually want to discipline yourself toward. The self that already has the wisdom you're seeking. Chapter 10. The Sage's Integration. We've journeyed through 9 principles. The warrior's advanced decision. The philosopher's pause. The monk's repetition. The general's strategy. The ascetic's freedom. The craftsman's patience. The ruler's restraint. The merchant's measurement. The hermit's silence. Now we arrive at the final secret, the one that makes all others work. The ancient sages understood that knowing principles isn't enough. You must integrate them into a coherent practice, a complete way of being. This is the art of integration. The sage wasn't someone who knew many things. The sage was someone who had unified knowledge into wisdom, who had transformed information into character, who had integrated practice into identity. Principles became person. This matters enormously for discipline. You can know everything we've discussed and still fail if you treat them as separate techniques to try randomly. Discipline emerges not from knowing techniques, but from integrating them into a unified approach to life. Think about a master musician. They don't think about individual techniques while playing. They've integrated thousands of hours of practice into fluid expression. The techniques are still there, but they've become invisible, automatic, part of who the musician is. Your discipline needs the same integration. The practices we've explored need to become automatic, invisible, part of your character, rather than techniques you consciously apply. How does this happen? The ancient approach was through what they called daily practice or rule of life. Not occasional effort when motivated. Not techniques used in crisis. A complete, integrated, daily practice that encompasses all the principles. The Stoics had their morning and evening review, contemplating principles, planning the day according to virtue, reviewing actions against intentions. This daily practice integrated all Stoic teachings into lived experience. Buddhist monks have their daily schedule. Meditation, work, study, ritual. Every day. The same integration of principles into practice. Over years, the principles become character. You need your own integrated practice. Not a random collection of techniques you try sometimes. A coherent daily practice that embodies the principles we've explored. Here's how to build it. Start with your morning. This is the warrior's principle of advanced decision. Before the day's chaos begins, before decisions become difficult, establish your identity and intentions. Begin with silence, even 5 minutes. The hermit's principle. Let the mind settle. Create space for wisdom rather than reaction. Then review your commitments. The ruler's principle. What have you decided in advance about who you are and what you do? Recall those decisions. Reinforce them before circumstances test them. Then prepare your environment. The general's principle. Structure your day so discipline becomes automatic. Remove temptations. Create systems. Position yourself for success. Through your day, practice the philosopher's pause. Between stimulus and response, create space. Notice impulses before acting on them. Choose rather than react. Practice the ascetic's restraint. When you could indulge, but don't need to, choose simplicity. Build freedom from unnecessary wants. Practice the craftsman's patience. Don't demand immediate results. Trust the process. Show up for the work regardless of visible progress. In evening, practice the merchant's measurement. Track what you committed to. Review honestly. Note patterns. Adjust for tomorrow. Practice the monk's repetition. The same practices daily, building neural pathways that make discipline automatic rather than effortful. This might seem like a lot. It's not. It's one integrated practice, flowing naturally through the day. Morning silence and intention setting takes 10 minutes. The pause between stimulus and response takes seconds. Evening review takes 5 minutes. The rest happens naturally through decisions made in advance and systems built strategically. The key is consistency. The ancient sages practiced daily for decades. Not perfectly. They had failures and struggles, but they returned to practice every day. That consistency created integration. Over time, the practice became who they were. There's a story about a student asking a Zen master the secret to enlightenment. The master replied, "When hungry, eat. When tired, sleep." The student was confused. "But everyone does that. What's special?" The master responded, "No. When most people eat, they think about 1,000 things. When they sleep, they worry about tomorrow. I'm talking about complete presence in each action." That's the integration. This is what you're building toward. Not thinking about discipline techniques constantly. Living them so completely they become invisible. Eating with awareness. Working with focus. Resting with completeness. Choosing with clarity. Each action integrated with your deepest intentions. The sage's wisdom is that discipline is not separate from life. It is life lived according to your highest understanding. It's not something you apply to your life. It's how you live your life. Ancient Chinese philosophy called this Wu Wei. Effortless action. Not no action, but action so aligned with your nature and practice that effort disappears. You're not forcing yourself to be disciplined. You're simply being yourself. And yourself has become disciplined through integration. This doesn't happen overnight. The sages practiced for lifetimes. But it begins with a single decision. The decision to integrate these principles into a daily practice. To stop treating discipline as occasional effort and start treating it as your way of life. Begin today. Create your integrated practice. Morning intention, daily awareness, evening review. The specific elements matter less than the consistency. Practice daily. Adjust as you learn. Trust the integration process. Over weeks, you'll notice the practices feeling more natural. Over months, they'll become habitual. Over years, they'll become character. You won't be someone trying to be disciplined. You'll be someone who is disciplined. The trying will have transformed into being. This is the ancient secret of self-discipline, fully revealed. It's not about willpower or motivation or tricks or hacks. It's about understanding timeless principles and integrating them into a coherent daily practice. It's about transformation from someone who struggles with discipline into someone who embodies it. The warrior, the philosopher, the monk, the general, the ascetic, the craftsman, the ruler, the merchant, the hermit. They're not different people. They're different aspects of the integrated self. The self that decides in advance, pauses before reacting, repeats with awareness, strategies for success, practices restraint, exercises patience, measures honestly, and finds wisdom in silence. That integrated self is who you become through daily practice. Not someday. Today, and tomorrow, and the next day, returning to practice regardless of circumstances. Integrating principles into character through consistent, mindful, patient repetition. The ancient secret is now yours. The question is not whether it works. Thousands of years of practice across cultures prove it works. The question is whether you'll practice it. Whether you'll begin the integration today. Whether you'll commit to the daily practice that transforms knowledge into wisdom, technique into character, intention into reality. The sages are waiting, not in the past, but in the integrated practice they discovered and passed down. Begin your practice. Return to it daily. Trust the integration. Become the discipline you seek. Thank you for walking this ancient path with me. May you find discipline, not through struggle but through integration, not through force but through wisdom, not through occasional effort but through daily practice. The secret is yours. The practice awaits. The transformation begins today.